Hey there people, what's up? This is Peter Sco from Music is a Journey. Today I'm going to do a video that was inspired by, I believe it was the Grant's Rock Warehaus YouTube channel. Grant's Rock Warehaus, a month or two ago, did a video where they were talking about, well, he and I think 3 guests were talking about their favorite year for releases in the 2000s. And I think each guest would introduce, would pick 2 years and then introduce some albums from each of those years. And I believe the idea was that they would try to come to a consensus which year was the best year for releases. And the reason why I started watching it was because one of the albums that Grant picked was one of my favorites from the 2000s, meaning 2000 up to 2009. So when I first saw that, I started thinking, I don't really talk so much about albums from the 2000s unless they're part of a discography series. I usually don't single out specifically albums from that decade. And I think partly because that decade for me was probably one of the most exciting, adventurous decades of my life. I'd come to Japan in 1999, and from 2000 and onwards, I traveled around in Japan. I started this whole campaign of hiking some of the highest mountain ranges in Japan, climbing some of the highest mountains and photographing them. I started traveling internationally much more. I went to Australia once, New Zealand twice, South Korea, China twice, went to the UK. I actually went back to Canada for a year, traveled more in Canada, did a bit of traveling in the States, went down to South America, to Peru, Argentina, Chile. I had started a kind of semi-professional photography career in the 90s, which was starting to pick up at one point and kind of started to slide down again. So when I came to Japan, I started trying to get my work out there, first by entering photo contests. Then eventually I started, I did self-publishing books, started to write articles. I saw my photographs and my articles published in magazines in different countries, even as I wrote articles about Japan. The whole decade was mostly me just really gearing up my photography and just making it bigger and bigger until, of course, I had kids, and then it suddenly shrank and got smaller and smaller again. But yeah, so my disposable income during that decade went mostly towards photography. However, I still really liked to explore music, and I think my musical, exploits, insofar as buying CDs went during the 2000s, the noughties, as people sometimes like to call them, was basically there were 5 points from which they came. One was following the recent releases of bands that I had become interested in the 1990s, particularly Canadian bands, of course. Picking up on Japanese bands. Since I had come to Japan, I was eager to find Japanese bands that I liked. I really got into Deep Purple at one point and started to explore what the past and present members of Deep Purple had done outside of Deep Purple. What else was there? There was a friend that I worked with, the guy I was working with, who became a very good friend of mine, still is. He would recommend stuff to me. And I guess the other thing was just I would walk into CD stores and they would have these displays. Usually you could sample, listen to like 6 or 8 new releases and see what you thought of them. And I bought a lot of CDs that way. You know, the first song was usually a killer track, and then I'd kind of skip around, and the rest of the album, yeah, it sounds like they're doing the same kind of thing, so let's get this one. And later on I'd find out it was just the first track that I really liked. But I still found some bands and artists that I really liked, and also I found some of the old ones too. In fact, it was that way that I got back into Deep Purple, because I remember walking into a CD store and seeing Rapture of the Deep on display and thinking, wow, Deep Purple have a new album out. I haven't bought anything of theirs since House of Blue Light. So yeah, that walking into the store and seeing what there was on display, that was also one of the ways of me finding out about new stuff. So what I want to do is I picked out 10 albums that I just really liked. I thought I would just stick to the years 2000 to 2009. So releases during that period. And then also they have to be albums that I picked up at that time. From the 2010s, I really got into progressive rock. I came back to extreme metal and other types of metal. So of course, a lot of the albums I picked up in the 2010s were from the 2000s. But I want to look at albums that I picked up that were released between 2000 and 2009. So here we go. So first album I want to talk about is this one here. Can you See this funky dance going on? This is the 5th major label. I have to say major label because they did have an independent release prior to this. But this is the 5th major label full-length original studio album by The Tea Party. There you go. And this is an interesting album because The Tea Party started out being a kind of Led Zeppelin-inspired hard rock, blues-based rock band with some Eastern influences in their music, which they developed more over the first couple of albums. And then they suddenly turned and went into an industrial band for a while. And then they tried to find like a kind of good balance between the hard rock side, the Eastern side, and the industrial side. And that came up to the 4th album. And it's usually those first 4 major label Tea Party albums that people talk about. However, the one that came, they did a compilation album, and then after that came out with this one here, the Interzone Mantras. And I think this is really a spectacular work because they've gone back to being the direction they were going in after the first 2 albums. So again, we've got a hard rock, somewhat blues-based, heavy rock band with Eastern influences, with acoustic stuff in here. They kind of show all their influences, and the industrial part is really squeaked way back to just a few little bits of electronica in hidden tracks between songs. Other than that, it's almost impossible to find any samples of it during the songs. There are some excellent tracks on here, like Soul Breaking, which is a really lovely, powerful ballad that really builds up. We've got Requiem, which is also really powerful. A song like Cathartic, which just has this excellent kick-ass riff and kind of a rare guitar solo, which we haven't heard so much of on the last couple of albums because of all this industrial stuff they had going on. The closing track, Mantra, is this, I don't know, it's like 8 minutes long, and it's one of the tracks that Tea Party really like to do, is to have like a 48 track song where they require like 48 studio tracks, I think 52 for another one. And it's just got so many different instruments and things going on in there. So they really broke out all of their Eastern instruments to bring in at the beginning and include in this song as well. It's quite heavy, it's quite haunting, and it's just really, really cool. So I've always really thought this was a great album, and I just don't hear people talk about it so much because the first 4 get so much more attention. But there it is, the Interzone Mantras. By the way, the last few days my voice has been really raw and I can't talk for too long without it changing and becoming difficult for me to speak. I actually almost got through this whole video last night, but my voice condition just got worse and worse, and then by chance the camera battery died. So this is take 2. Alright, another artist I discovered in the 90s was a fella named Matthew Good. He had a band called the Matthew Good Band. They released, I think it was 4 albums, 2 EPs, and also had a compilation with some additional tracks from some rare releases. And that's really, really cool stuff. It's a very unusual, very personal, I guess, individual style of alternative rock, because Matthew Good has a unique vocal style. It's not weird, it's kind of unique. It's distinguishable. You know it's him when he's singing. And as well, his lyric writing is quite symbolic or enigmatic, and it sounds really cool even you don't know what he's talking about. But he left his Matthew Good band and went off to a solo career, and I think this is 2003. This is his first solo album, just simply as Matthew Good. The album was called Avalanche, and I think he really outdid himself on this album. What have we got here? Is it 13 tracks? If I were to make a compilation of my favorite Matthew Good band and Matthew Good songs, and I have 9 full-length albums, 2 EPs, and the aforementioned compilation. I don't have all of his stuff, but out of all that I have, I think if I were to make a top 10 favorite, 5 nominations would come from this album alone, and 3 of them would definitely make it on there. Songs like While We Were Hunting Rabbits, it's so atmospheric in some parts, it's these kind of slow builds in some parts, it's very dramatic, it closes out with just like some cello and strings, really atmospheric in a way. We've got a song like, what's it called, 21st Century Living, which is talking about how things are, we got to supersize everything, you want the supersize, and then they start talking about, how about we supersize third world debt relief, or supersize this song, supersize our ambition, and it's kind of humorous, but does actually have a message. Double Life is just got some really great music, like really powerful song. I just love that one. And Near Fantastica, really cool thing is that they've got this, it has, first of all, it's like a Who Won't Get Fooled Again type of epic feel to it, but without sounding like the Who song. And one really cool thing they do is with the drum track, there are parts where they put these stops in the drum track, which actually make it sound like beats, which is really kind of interesting. Like, you feel that there's a beat where there's actually a gap. So that's a really cool effect that I haven't really heard other people doing. Maybe they have, but I haven't heard it. And then there's House of Smoke and Mirrors, just really nice closer to the album. Very slow piece with some beautiful piano in some parts. So really love this Matthew Good Avalanche. If you've never heard Matthew Good, he's got probably 8 or 9 albums on his own. Avalanche, I think, is an excellent starting point. Next up is Sloan. This is their 6th album. They just finished off the 1990s with 2 excellent retro rock style albums. But for this one here, there was a kind of a turnaround. 2 of the members had just come out of relationship collapses, I guess. They were a little bit heavy in the heart. They also had a lot of material that they'd had kind of like lying around that had never been properly assembled into songs, and they decided to try to clean house a little bit. So they put a lot of different ideas into this album. For those of you who don't know, Sloan is a 4-member band. They do actually have a 5th member playing keyboards for them now, and that was basically because we have 2 members who play piano and organ, and it just got really tricky when they're performing live. They always had to switch members around, like when the drummer came up to play the piano, then the bass player had to go play the drums, and the rhythm guitar player had to play the bass. And I think by getting a proper keyboard player in, which they've had now since 2006, they were actually much better able to handle themselves on stage. But anyway, back at this time here, basically we're talking about 4-member band, 4 lead singers, 4 songwriters, okay? So that kind of a setup here. And this album I thought was really cool. At this point, Sloan was my absolute favorite band, and they're still one of my top favorites of all time, but I was so much into them at the time, so I was really excited when this album came out. I actually was like following comments on their web page or chat rooms or whatever. And yeah, this album starts with one of their coolest songs. If it feels good, do it, with an excellent video to it as well. The Other Man is a song about, you know, the guy who wants the girl who's in a relationship that's falling apart, but it's not over yet. So he's, you know, kind of unfavorably looked upon because he's trying to move in on her while she's still with the other guy. We've got somewhere in the middle, Dreaming of You, first of all, a very beautiful song. I think it's about a guy who has an interest in a girl who's a bit younger, but he's kind of suggesting they have to wait, at least until she turns 19. I think that's what it's about. Sounds like it. But again, a bit enigmatic. The closing songs of the album, it's like a series of just really cool, slow songs and ballads. I Love a Long Goodbye, sounding like a George Harrison song. Are You Giving Me Back My Love? Really, really sad. Your Dreams Have Come True. Really pretty song with some trumpet in there as well. I recently heard somebody say that the album starts off great and finishes great, but it kind of wanders in the middle section. There's like an acoustic piece. There is a couple of heavier tracks. There's a kind of experimental heavy track. But I think overall, just the collection of songs on here is really good. Like for me, there's probably only 2 or 3 that I might feel like skipping sometimes. So I think it's a very solid album. Sloan's albums are pretty much always pretty solid anyway. But Pretty Together from 2001, I like it. And by the way, Pretty Together comes from Lou Reed with the Velvet Underground saying like, hey, that sounds pretty together. Okay, that's it for the Canadian stuff from the 90s that continued on into the 2000s. Some of the Japanese artists I got into when I first came here in July, beginning of July, actually Canada Day, 1999. A couple of weeks after I went into a store, I heard this song, kind of a rock song, melodic rock song, but with a really powerful vocalist. Like a lot of Japanese female singers have a more kind of higher tone, girlish type voice, and I heard somebody who had just a really powerful woman's voice, and that was a woman by the name of Yano Maki, or Maki Yano if you want to go first name last name. So this was was it her 3rd or 4th album, Kono Sekai ni Ikite, Living in This World, And what was really interesting about this one is they really stepped away from her previous album sound, which was kind of edgy rock, a little bit like Alanis Morissette, but not quite. But also some kind of like, singer-songwriter, female singer-songwriter type songs, some acoustic ones, sometimes a bit poppy. And here they just went into this really interesting direction where we have various styles of music that you can almost imagine being played in a kind of lounge atmosphere. So we've got songs with hand drums, we've got piano, we've got vibraphone, we've got some brass in some songs, some strings in some songs, some acoustic only, like acoustic guitar and vocals only, and the opening track does have a bit of that kind of edgy, slower, serious rock sound to it. So it is quite a variety. And honestly speaking, most of the styles of the music on this album are not my usual choice. When I see other people, like in the vinyl community, some people showing some of their favorite albums or albums they picked up somewhere, quite often I think, it's not my taste. I would never buy such a record. But thinking about it, actually, a lot of those styles are present on this album here. And even though they're not my choice, the reason why I picked this album is I just think it was so successfully done. They really put her into, Miss Yano, they put her into some different musical environments where she fits in very nicely, and it came out extremely well. In a way, it's kind of typical for Japanese to try to do this kind of thing, I feel. Like experiment with other genres or other types of music from different parts of the world. But yeah, it was a very successful album, I think, this one here. So, Kono Sekai ni Ikite, is that what it was now? I forgot. Kono Sekai ni Ikite, ne? Yeah, that was it. How's my voice holding up? Next up, one of my all-time favorite Japanese bands is Garnet Crow. This was their 5th album, The Twilight Valley. Beautiful little digipack here. I bought this when it first came out. It was like 2005, 2006, around that time there. There's a little booklet hiding in here too. Garnet Crow started out as what they called a neo-folk band in 1999 with an independent EP release. And then after that, they signed to a major label. And they became kind of more of a pop band or pop rock band, but have just some really great catchy hooks and melodies in their songs. One of the things I find really interesting about them is the singer is actually the composer of the songs. She has some classical training on piano. The keyboard player is the songwriter who draws a lot of inspiration from books. She's quite a bibliophile. And then they've got a very genre-fluid guitarist who just seems to be able to play all sorts of different things. And then the 4th member is actually a producer who does a lot of mixing and programming, but can also play keyboards. And then sometimes they'll have, other session musicians come in, especially drums. Now, I don't really care too much for the programmed drums that appear on a lot of the songs. I don't care too much for the really poppy type songs, which they do have. But it's the other half of their music I really enjoy, where there's these almost like progressive pop rock. So sometimes really cool guitar, some really great piano stuff. Often the vocal arrangements are really fantastic. And when I actually bother to listen to the lyrics, there's some pretty deep, cool lyrics. This album just packs a wide variety of stuff, from a very beautiful, kind of haunting piano-led opener, a very kind of exotic world type music track on here, more pop rock type track. And one of my favorite Garnet Crow songs of all time, Rusty Rail, just a really pretty song with a kind of acoustic guitar riff to lead it in and take it out. So I could pick almost any Garnet Crow album because most of them are half not quite to my taste, but still kind of acceptable, and half really original. And so I just really like the look of this one as well. So Garnet Crow's The Twilight Valley is one of my picks. One more Japanese band. There was an animation that came out for a manga called Death Note, which is about an angel of death. There are many of them. They have these notebooks that they write the names of the people in who are going to die. And if there's a way that they're going to die, like in an accident, that's written in the book too. And once that's written in, then that event actually happens and those people die. And one of these death angels accidentally drops his notebook and is picked up by an average guy who eventually discovers what the book can do. And then, how does he use it? But the opening and closing tracks for the anime were by this band here, Maximum the Hormone. Check out that back cover. Buiki Kaise! Give me back my life! Looks like the old lady is chasing after her old man husband with a big, kitchen knife. Anyway, Maximum the Hormone are one of the most fantastic bands I've ever heard because they cover styles like deathcore, metalcore, they cover hardcore punk, they cover reggae, they cover pop punk, some death metal as well. Just all sorts of interesting extreme music. And they combine these different styles, sometimes 3 or 4 different styles, into a single song. And they can just pivot between styles as easily as anything. So you'll be hearing like this kind of punk flavored reggae type thing, and then they'll just drop in this heavy riff, and suddenly these roaring death metal vocals will come in, which will then change over to this screamo metalcore type vocal style, and then go into this kind of pop punk flavor and flip back into the reggae again. It's really amazing that they do that. But the 2 songs, the opener and closer to that anime, were just both really heavy kick-ass songs. They've got 2 male vocalists, one doing the kind of more punkish and screamo type, and another guy doing the more death metal, growly, roary type. And then their drummer, who is a woman, does kind of lighter female style vocals for kind of more lighter poppy effects sometimes, or just sometimes for interesting amusing effect in the heavy stuff. By the way, the drummer now, she is the inspiration to so many of these female drummers in these all-female Japanese metal bands these days. You ask any of the drummers in bands like Bandmate, Aldios, or forget who the other, Love Bites, they can pretty much tell you that Now from Maximum the Hormone was their inspiration. Okay, I mentioned I went back to Deep Purple and then checked out what albums other band members had done outside of the band. Blackmore's Night had some pretty cool stuff. Ian Gillan had a really cool solo album. Whitesnake, Good to Be Bad, excellent album. But the one I'm going to pick out of all of them is this one here. This is Don Airey, A Light in the Sky. And this is just such a fantastically diverse album of different types of keyboard-based, but also including guitar and rock band as well, songs. Here comes the cat. Okay, the cat said he wanted to go out, but actually he doesn't want to go out, so... Wait. Can you see this guy? Here he is. Okay, so anyway, Dawn Area Light in the Sky. Just a very interesting album. Mostly instrumental, a lot of shorter pieces, some very spacey things, some with some of the heavy Hammond organ style, and a really beautiful one with some fast-paced classical piano in tandem with classical violin. Just really quite a variety of very excellent stuff. And a couple of songs on too with actual vocals. So there he is, Don Airey on the back there. Really cool album. Very glad I got that one there. So one of the albums that I decided to mention that I picked up by just walking in the store and seeing what was there, I went over to the heavy metal section and found a new album by Creator, Violent Revolution. Now this is going back to 2001, I think. So this is an old story now. But yeah, I mean, I was into extreme metal in the mid-1980s, and Creator were one of the bands. I had one of their albums and I loved it. So it was kind of cool to walk in and see, hey, Creator have a new album out. Gee, I wonder how it sounds, because I never bought anything else other than their second album, Pleasure to Kill. So I bought this, and I really liked it. And this was important because I kind of fell out of heavy metal at the times. I wasn't really into groove metal. Death metal didn't really do anything for me back in those days. New metal, just forget it. I just could not get into that. And I'd kind of written off modern times heavy metal and thought all the good stuff was in the 1980s and 70s, whatever. But I really like this Creator album. There were just several really cool tracks. I think Bittersweet Revenge is my favorite, but looking at the track list now, there are others on here as well. Replica of Life, Ghetto War, Violent Revolution, The Patriarch. Yeah, several really great tracks on this album. So that was really nice to be able to pick up kind of extreme metal album and really enjoy it. It's double trouble today, people. Here's the second one. This is Miko. Hi, Miko. Last one was Kurama. There's one more cat, but he almost never comes upstairs. Alright, you going back out again? My voice is almost gone, but we're almost done here. So 2 more. These are the ones that were recommended by the guy I worked with. So one day he came up to me and he said, you gotta see this video. And he showed me a video for a song called I Believe in a Thing Called Love by The Darkness. And it was so cool because it was like all the fun stuff about 80s glam metal, 70s glam rock, just in an updated version. Really cool guitar sounds, very catchy, fun songs, a guy who could sing really powerfully in falsetto. And I just had to go out and get this album, and I love it. There are so many great tracks on this. I bought the one that came after, which is not as heavy, still quite good, but this is just such a killer album. I really don't know what they've done since then. I know that they split up for a bit. Some members did a band called the Stone Gods, then they came back again, but I haven't heard anything they've done since then. But their debut, Permission to Land, this is a really terrific album. And this is the one that Grant's Rock Warehouse mentioned. Grant himself pulled up as one of his choices for the 2000s. So that's what inspired this video. So the last one, he said to me one day, you know Wolf Mother, right? I said, I've never heard of them. What? You've never heard of Wolf Mother? And I was kind of annoyed because he often did this kind of thing, like made me feel like I'm somehow on another planet and I've totally missed out what's going on. So I was like, no, I've never heard of Wolf Mother. So he said, that's okay, I only just found out about them last night myself. So he let me listen to a song called Sundial off this album here, Cosmic Egg, Wolf Mother's second album. Man, what a wonderful, heavy guitar riff. I loved that. That was what I really wanted to hear. Stoner rock, but a really heavy stoner rock. 2 cats are looking at the door here. Can I finish talking about Wolf Mother, you two, or are you going to start fighting? Anyway, so yeah, this is a Cosmic Egg. There was a regular single CD version, and then there was a double CD version. I got the double CD version. Not that you can tell. The CDs are hiding in the flaps here. And I think it's just a terrific album. Just so many tracks with these wonderful, really heavy riffs. And I remember Andrew Stockdale, he said some interview, he just said there's nothing like a monster riff that just knocks you on your ass. And they just packed that into this album in so many places. I bought their debut album, which is also a terrific album, but quite different because it sounds more like a 1970s almost Uriah Heep type style, which has also got some terrific tracks on there. But I want to mention this one here just because I think riff for riff and pound for pound, I like this one just a bit more. So, cats are fighting. I think it's a good time to wrap up this video. I gotta let these guys out. And that's it. My voice held through. So those are 10 of my picks for albums I really like from 2000 to 2009. Why don't you tell me in the comments what some of your favorite albums are? And I will surely reply because it won't require my voice to do that. Okay, I'll be back next week with another video, hopefully with a clearer voice. And we'll see you in that one. Thanks, everyone. Ciao.